This is a prepaid call from
Familiar car.
an inmate at a Florida Department of Corrections institution.
In the dark underbelly of the criminal justice system, there exist names that strike fear into the hearts of even the most hardened criminals. Their names whispered in hushed tones, their stories, chilling tales of violence and depravity. These women's reign of terror left a trail of destruction in its wake. Meet the most dangerous women on death row. Carrie Lynn Dalton.
Carrie is 48 years old, the mother of 5 children ranging in age from 12 to 21. Carrie was convicted of torturing and murdering another woman by injecting her with a syringe of battery acid.
It was a night in 1988 that would forever change the course of Dalton's life. Gathered at her house were a group of individuals, including Melanie, PK, and Cheryl Baker. Drug use was not uncommon in this circle, but on that particular day, Dalton was sober, unaware of the horrors that would unfold. Dalton, known as the ringleader, held a certain power over the group. She was the shot caller, the one who dictated what needed to be done and how it should be carried out. Her influence over the others was undeniable, and they listened to her every command.
Melanie came up to me. We were washing the dishes. She grabbed the kitchen knife, said she wanted to stab Carrie, and then told me that they're going to kill me. And I'm all like, thinking like this girl's nuts. Like, what are you talking about? I just thought the girl was high enough for a rocker.
The next morning, as she returned home after being dropped off by TK and Cheryl, she was met with a scene of chaos. Her belongings were strewn outside, the trash can overturned, and a pillow soaked in blood caught her attention. It was a sight that sent shivers down her spine, a foreboding sign of the horrors that awaited her. As Dalton's friend investigated further, the true extent of the tragedy became apparent. Electric cords, cut and frayed, hinted at the presence of someone bound and restrained. Her chandelier lamp was missing, replaced by bare wires in another room. And then, the most chilling discovery of all, a knife, stained with hair and fragments of skull, a gruesome piece of evidence that confirmed her worst fears. In that moment, she knew without a shadow of a doubt that Melanie had met a gruesome fate. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, painting a horrifying picture of what had transpired in her absence. The details of the murder were nothing short of chilling, a testament to the depths of human depravity. The prosecution wasted no time in charging 3 individuals in connection with the murder of Melanie May: Dalton, Mr. Tompkins, and Miss Baker. While Mr. Tompkins pled guilty to first-degree murder and Miss Baker agreed to cooperate with the prosecution, Dalton chose to go to trial, a decision that would seal her fate. The case against Dalton was built entirely on witness testimony, with Cheryl Baker taking the stand to reveal the horrifying details of that fateful night. She testified that Dalton had tied Melanie to a chair, covering her head with a sheet. Cheryl also claimed that Dalton accused Melanie of being a snitch, showing her syringes filled with battery acid and instructing her to inject Melanie with it. The jury, confronted with the gruesome nature of the crime and Dalton's alleged involvement, found her guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and murder. 2 special circumstances were also identified: the murder committed while lying in wait and the murder committed by way of torture. The jury's verdict was swift and unyielding, as they determined that Dalton's actions and the life she led before the murder merited the ultimate punishment, the death penalty. Dalton has spent a little over 5 years on death row, but her journey through the criminal justice system began 9 years ago when she first entered prison. During her time incarcerated, she has expressed deep feelings of regret and remorse for her past actions. She acknowledges her involvement in armed robberies and burglaries, understanding that she is far from an innocent angel plucked from society. Dalton finds herself in a perplexing situation as she questions the lack of physical evidence in her case. There is no body, no weapon, and no death certificate to definitively prove her guilt. Yet, despite the absence of concrete evidence, the jury handed down a death penalty verdict, convinced of Dalton's irredeemable nature and the gruesome manner in which the crime was committed. Throughout her time on death row, Dalton has found solace in the support she receives from individuals like Sister Helen Prayon. Sister Helen is a prominent figure in the anti-death penalty movement, and her presence has been a source of comfort for Dalton. In a system that dehumanizes and vilifies those on death row, Sister Helen's unwavering support serves as a reminder that every life, guilty or innocent, deserves to be treated with dignity. Dalton's relationship with her mother has also played a significant role in her life. Her mother had a rose tattooed on her chest, a symbol of love and remembrance. Dalton, in tribute to her mother, has a rose tattoo of her own, with the words "loving memory" etched beneath it. However, their relationship has been strained due to her mother's struggles with addiction. Dalton has had to distance herself from the pain and chaos that addiction brings, prioritizing her own well-being. However, while in jail, Carrie now shows remorse for what she has done.
Definitely. Regret, shame, remorse, of course.
I've committed armed robberies. I've committed burglaries. I'm by no means some angel, poor innocent, picked up out of society. My life took me here.
Emilia Carr. Emilia Carr was born Emilia Yera on August 4, 1984, and grew up in a tumultuous environment. From a young age, she faced unimaginable challenges that would shape her future. As the second of three sisters, Emilia's life took a dark turn when she reported abuse by her father at the age of 15. However, she later withdrew her statement, leaving her trapped in a cycle of fear and silence. Emilia's father was eventually convicted of attempting to solicit the murders of his family, including Emilia, her mother, and one of her sisters. This traumatic event further added to the complexities of Emilia's life. The scars of her past haunted her, and she struggled to find stability and security. Despite these hardships, Emilia managed to build relationships and start a family of her own. However, her journey took a sinister turn when she became entangled in a love triangle that would ultimately lead to a shocking and brutal murder. The love triangle involved Emilia, her boyfriend Joshua Fulgham, and Heather Strong, Joshua's ex-wife. Emilia's relationship with Joshua was intense and volatile. They had a history of breaking up and getting back together, and their connection was marked by emotional and physical abuse. Heather Strong, on the other hand, was a vibrant and caring woman who had endured years of abuse from Joshua during their marriage. As the love triangle unfolded, tensions escalated, and Emilia's involvement deepened. She found herself torn between her loyalty to Joshua and her growing resentment towards Heather. The situation reached a breaking point when Joshua and Emilia hatched a plan to lure Heather to a storage trailer where they would exact their revenge.
In March 2009, the Marion County Sheriff's Office received a report that a wife and mother of two small children had suddenly disappeared.
It wasn't until March 19, 2009, that her remains were discovered in a shallow grave near a storage trailer in Boardman, Florida. The details of her murder were nothing short of chilling. Emilia Carr had tricked Heather into the storage trailer behind the home of Carr's mother, Maria. There, she placed a plastic bag over Heather's head, attempting to break her neck in a desperate bid to end her life quickly and painlessly. When that failed, Heather was bound by duct tape to a computer chair, where she eventually succumbed to asphyxiation. Emilia Carr was arrested on March 24, 2009, after her frequent and suspicious statements to authorities raised red flags.
I can play it off like I didn't know anything.
Undercover audio recordings captured her discussing the gruesome details of the crime with Joshua's sister, further solidifying her involvement. Emilia, who was 7 months pregnant with Joshua's child at the time of her arrest, gave birth while in custody at the Marion County Jail. Her family gained custody of her older 3 children, while her daughter with Joshua was later adopted. The trials of Emilia Carr and Joshua Fulgham were highly publicized as the community sought answers and closure. Emilia's defense team argued that she had been coerced into her actions and that her traumatic past had influenced her behavior. However, the jury saw through the defense's arguments and found Emilia guilty of first-degree murder and kidnapping. During the penalty phase of the trial, Emilia's family testified on her behalf, revealing the deep scars left by her abusive upbringing. Despite their pleas for leniency, the jury voted 7-5 in favor of the death penalty for Emilia Carr. On February 22, 2011, she was formally sentenced to death by lethal injection. After hours of deliberation, the jury reached their verdicts. Emilia Carr was found guilty of first-degree murder and kidnapping, while Joshua Fulgham faced the same charges. The courtroom was filled with tension as the jury's decisions were read aloud. During the penalty phase of the trial, Emilia's family pleaded for leniency, highlighting the impact of her troubled past on her actions. They painted a picture of a woman who had been deeply scarred by abuse and trauma. However, the jury's decision was clear. Emilia Carr was sentenced to death by lethal injection, while Joshua Fulgham received 2 consecutive life sentences in prison. However, after an appeal process, she was given a life sentence. Shauna Ford. Shauna was a hairdresser in a small town in Washington. She had a normal life, but something changed in her. She became obsessed with border issues and the idea of protecting our country. Shauna Ford's fascination with border issues led her to Arizona, where she sought to join the ranks of the Minutemen groups and border militias. It was here that she would meet like-minded individuals who shared her extreme views. With her persuasive charm, Shauna recruited individuals who were willing to take extreme measures to protect what they believed was their country. Among them were Jason Eugene Bush and Albert Robert Gaxiola, who would become key players in the events that unfolded. Shauna Ford's group, Minutemen American Defense, believed that they were the last line of defense against illegal immigration and drug cartels. But as their beliefs grew more radical, so did their actions. The group's initial goal of monitoring the border soon turned into a desire for vigilante justice. Shauna Ford's obsession with protecting the border took a dark turn when she began to believe that the Flores family, living in Arivaca, Arizona, was involved in drug trafficking. This belief would set set in motion a series of events that would lead to a horrific home invasion. They knew a family lived here, and they knew exactly what they were going to do. Their true mission was to eliminate the family. The lore surrounding the Flores family suggested that Raul Flores Jr., the father, was involved in drug trafficking and had a substantial amount of money hidden on the property. But the truth was far from the rumors. Raul Flores Jr. was a hard-working man who raised his daughters in that house. He didn't keep drugs or money there. It was a place where they had family dinners and created memories. Unbeknownst to the Flores family, their lives were about to be shattered by the darkness that Shauna Ford and her accomplices carried within them. The stage was set for a brutal home invasion that would leave a lasting mark on the community. On that fateful day, the lives of Raul Flores Jr. and his young daughter, Brisenia, would be brutally taken in a home invasion orchestrated by Shauna Ford and her accomplices. Shauna Ford and her accomplices gained entry into the Flores home under the guise of being officials searching for fugitives. Little did the family know that their lives were in grave danger. The intruders had expected to find drugs and money, which they believed Raul Flores Jr. had hidden on the property, but their search yielded nothing, and their true intentions became clear. When they realized there were no drugs or money, they took inexpensive jewelry instead. But that wasn't enough for them. They were there to eliminate the entire family. In a horrifying act of violence, Shauna Ford's accomplices opened fire on Raul Flores Jr. and his daughter Brisenia and instantly killed them. As the shots rang out, Gina Gonzalez, the wife and mother, fought for her life. She was shot 3 times but managed to survive by pretending to be dead. When she thought they were gone, Gina Gonzalez called 911 and armed herself with her husband's handgun. But the nightmare was far from over. The intruders returned to the home, unaware that Gina Gonzalez was still alive. During this time, she exchanged gunfire with the attackers, wounding one of them. The investigation into the home invasion led law enforcement to Shauna Ford, Jason Eugene Bush, and Albert Robert Gaxiola. The truth behind their motives and the extent of their involvement would be revealed in a court of law. The trial that followed exposed the chilling details of Shauna Ford's role as the mastermind behind the crime. Gina Gonzalez bravely testified, recounting the horrifying moments when her husband and daughter were murdered. The evidence presented during the trial was overwhelming. Shauna Ford's involvement in the planning and execution of the home invasion was undeniable. The jury had no choice but to hold her accountable for her actions. In the end, Shauna Ford, Jason Eugene Bush, and Albert Robert Gaxiola were all convicted of the murders. Ford and Bush were sentenced to death, while Gaxiola received life imprisonment without parole. Lisa Montgomery. Lisa Montgomery, born on February 27, 1968 in Melbourne, Kansas, had a troubled upbringing marked by a history of abuse and neglect. Growing up, she endured unimaginable hardships that shaped her into the person she would become. It was on December 16, 2004, that Lisa Montgomery committed a crime that would send shockwaves throughout the nation. On that fateful day, she traveled from her hometown to Skidmore, Missouri with a sinister plan in mind. Her target was Bobby Jo Stinnett, a young pregnant woman who Lisa had met online through a dog breeding forum. Under the guise of purchasing a puppy, Lisa gained access to Bobby Jo's home. Once inside, she launched a brutal and calculated attack on the unsuspecting victim. Overpowered by Lisa's sheer determination, Bobby Jo was unable to defend herself against the onslaught. Lisa, driven by a twisted desire to possess a child of her own, proceeded to cut out the fetus from Bobby Jo's womb. The crime was discovered when Bobby Jo's mother, who had become concerned after not hearing from her daughter, went to her house and made the horrifying discovery. The authorities were immediately alerted, and a nationwide manhunt for Lisa Montgomery was launched. The sheer brutality and premeditation of Lisa's actions were beyond comprehension. The fact that she had meticulously planned and executed such a heinous act left the community and the nation in a state of shock. As the investigation unfolded, the evidence against Lisa Montgomery became overwhelming. Forensic experts pieced together the chilling sequence of events, and witnesses came forward to testify against her. The prosecution built a strong case, leaving no doubt as to Lisa's guilt. In 2007, Lisa Montgomery stood trial for her crimes. The courtroom was filled with tension as the prosecution presented the evidence, painting a vivid picture of the gruesome murder. The defense, on the other hand, attempted to portray Lisa as a victim of her own traumatic past, arguing for leniency. After a lengthy trial, the jury delivered their verdict: guilty. Lisa Montgomery was found guilty of kidnapping resulting in death, and the jury recommended the death penalty. The judge, in agreement with the jury's decision, sentenced Lisa to be executed. Immediately after her sentencing, Lisa's defense team launched an appeal, arguing that her traumatic past and mental health issues should be taken into consideration. They claimed that Lisa suffered from severe mental illness, including dissociative identity disorder, which impaired her ability to understand the consequences of her actions. The appeal process brought the case to the attention of mental health experts who conducted evaluations to determine Lisa's mental state. Their findings were presented in court, with some experts arguing that her mental illness should be considered a mitigating factor, while others maintained that it did not absolve her of responsibility for her crimes. As the appeals process continued, the case garnered significant media attention, sparking a nationwide debate on the death penalty and mental health. Advocates for Lisa argued that executing someone with severe mental illness would be inhumane and contrary to the principles of justice. They called for her sentence to be commuted to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. On the other side of the debate, proponents of the death penalty emphasized the heinous nature of Lisa's crime and the need for justice to be served. They argued that her mental illness should not overshadow the fact that she had committed a brutal murder and violated the sanctity of life. The legal battles reached the highest levels of the judicial system, with the case eventually making its way to the Supreme Court. In a landmark decision, the Supreme Court ruled that Lisa's execution could proceed, despite the arguments regarding her mental health. The EO decision was met with both support and outrage, further fueling the controversy surrounding the case. As the execution date drew near, protests and petitions emerged, calling for clemency and a reconsideration of Lisa's sentence. Advocacy groups, mental health organizations, and even some high-profile individuals joined the chorus of voices opposing her execution. They argued that the death penalty was a cruel and outdated form of punishment, and that Lisa's mental illness should have been taken into greater consideration. Despite the mounting pressure, the execution date remained unchanged. On January 13, 2021, Lisa Montgomery was executed by lethal injection at the Federal Correctional Complex in Terre Haute, Indiana. Her execution marked the first time in nearly 7 decades that the federal government had executed a female inmate. Tiffany Cole. Tiffany Ann Cole was no stranger to the Sumner family. Her family had been neighbors to Carol and Reggie Sumner, a loving couple in their 60s in South Carolina. The Sumners were known for their kindness and generosity, always willing to lend a helping hand to those in need. However, fate had a different plan for the Sumners. In March 2005, they decided to move to Jacksonville, Florida. Seeking a fresh start in their retirement years, little did they know that this move would bring them face to face with Tiffany Cole once again. Tiffany had her own troubled past, marked by a history of abusive relationships and a battle with drug addiction. It was during this time that she crossed paths with Michael James Jackson, a man who would become her boyfriend and partner in crime. Tiffany and Michael's relationship began under unusual circumstances. Michael had stolen from Tiffany's hotel room, but instead of seeking revenge, they formed an unlikely bond. Together, they embarked on a dangerous journey fueled by their shared desire for easy money. In June 2005, Tiffany and Michael made their way to Jacksonville to complete the paperwork for a car that Tiffany had purchased from the Sumners. They stayed at the Sumner home during their visit, seemingly harmless guests in the eyes of Carol and Reggie. Little did the Sumners know that behind closed doors, Michael was hatching a sinister plan. He saw an opportunity to rob the couple and steal their money, a plan that would soon escalate into something far more sinister. The Sumners, unaware of the danger lurking within their own home, told them of their recent financial gain with Tiffany and Michael. This information became the catalyst for the tragic events that would unfold in the days to come. In early July 2005, Tiffany, Michael, and 2 other men, Alan Wade and Bruce Nixon, arrived at the Sumners' home. Wade and Nixon, acting as accomplices, approached the door and asked to use the phone. It was a seemingly innocent request that would seal the Sumners' fate. Once inside, the true intentions of Wade and Nixon were revealed. Wade carried duct tape, while Nixon brandished a lifelike toy gun. The Sumners were quickly overpowered, their lives forever changed in an instant. Bound, gagged, and blindfolded with duct tape, the Sumners became prisoners in their own home. Wade and Nixon ransacked the residence, searching for personal financial documents that would grant them access to the couple's bank accounts. Desperate for assistance in finding the ATM information, Wade and Nixon called upon Michael for help, but despite their efforts, they were still looking for the pins needed to access the Sumners' funds. With the Sumners still bound and gagged, Wade and Nixon made a chilling decision. They locked the couple in the trunk of their own Lincoln Town car, leaving them helpless and terrified. Tiffany and Michael followed in a Mazda, driven by Tiffany herself. The group embarked on a harrowing journey across state lines, heading to a remote part of Georgia where a pre-dug grave awaited them. Finally arriving in Georgia, the group's true intentions were revealed. Wade and Nixon drove drove the Lincoln into the woods, leaving Tiffany behind with the Mazda. The stage was set for a horrifying act of brutality. The Lincoln was backed up to the grave and a momentary disquiet filled the air. The group hesitated, unsure of who would carry out the final, gruesome act. When the trunk was opened, a horrifying discovery awaited them. The Sumners, still alive and moderately mobile, clung to each other in a desperate attempt to find solace in their final moments, but their pleas for mercy fell on deaf ears. Michael, driven by a cold and callous nature, ordered Nixon to bind the Sumners once again, replacing the duct tape that had loosened. With the Sumners helpless and terrified, Nixon joined Tiffany at the roadside, leaving Michael and Wade alone with the victims at the gravesite. The exact details of what transpired next remain shrouded in darkness, but the unimaginable truth is that the Sumners were placed together into the grave while still alive. The weight of the soil was built up around them, sealing their fate in a slow and torturous death. The group, now in possession of the PIN numbers to the Sumners' bank accounts, drove away in the Lincoln, leaving behind a trail of devastation. Tiffany, on the other hand, pawned stolen jewelry and other items from the Sumners' home, further profiting from their heinous acts. But their actions did not go unnoticed. Suspicion arose, and the police launched a relentless investigation. The truth began to unravel, leading to the arrest of Tiffany Cole, Michael Jackson, Alan Wade, and Bruce Nixon. In October 2007, Tiffany faced a week-long trial that ended with a guilty verdict for first-degree murder. The jury wasted no time in delivering their decision, and the evidence presented, including photos of Tiffany and her co-defendants celebrating with champagne and hands full of cash, painted a chilling picture of their lack of remorse. 5 months later, a judge handed down 2 death sentences for the murders and a sentence of life in prison for the kidnappings. Tiffany Cole awaited her ultimate fate at the Lowell Correctional Institution Annex, one of 3 women on Florida's death row. Rosie Alfaro. Rosie Alfaro was born as Maria del Rosio Alfaro on October 12, 1971, in Anaheim, California. Her childhood was far from idyllic, as she grew up in a troubled environment. At the young age of 13, Rosie fell into the clutches of drug addiction, a path that would lead her down a dark and dangerous road. By the time she turned 14, Rosie had become involved in prostitution, a desperate attempt to support her drug habit. The streets became her home, and she was forced to navigate the seedy underbelly of society at an age when most children are still innocent and carefree. At just 15 years old, Rosie found herself thrust into the role of a single mother. With 4 children to care for, she faced the daunting challenges of parenthood at an age when most teenagers are still discovering themselves. The weight of responsibility and the struggles of her tumultuous life began to take their toll. But it was at the age of 18 that Rosie's life took a sinister turn. It was during this time that she committed a crime so heinous that it would earn her the notorious distinction of being the first woman in Orange County, California, to receive the death penalty. On June 15, 1990, 9-year-old Autumn Wallace was left home, alone, eagerly awaiting the return of her older sister and mother from work. Rosie Alfaro, who was well acquainted with the Wallace family, saw an opportunity to satisfy her insatiable drug addiction. Believing the house to be empty, Rosie devised a plan to steal items from the Wallace home and sell them for drug money. Approaching the door, Rosie pretended to be a friend of Autumn's sister, gaining entry into the house. Once inside, she asked to use the bathroom. Armed with a knife she had taken from the kitchen, Rosie led the unsuspecting girl to the bathroom, where she unleashed a brutal and merciless attack. Autumn Wallace, a mere child, was stabbed a shocking 50 times, her life extinguished in a senseless act of violence. Rosie's motive for the murder was as disturbing as the act itself. She intended to steal items from the Wallace home, hoping to sell them for drug money. The stolen property, valued at a mere $240, would prove to be a paltry sum compared to the devastation and loss it caused. The aftermath of the crime was marked by Rosie's attempts to evade justice. During a police-taped interview, she confessed to the crime, claiming that she was under the influence of heroin and cocaine at the time of the murder. However, this claim was never proven, as she was not arrested and drug tested within the required time frame. As the investigation unfolded, Rosie's story began to change. She alleged that an unidentified man had forced her to commit the heinous act, but she refused to provide any details or identify the man. Her shifting narratives only added to the complexity of the case, leaving investigators and the community puzzled and disturbed. Despite Rosie's attempts to evade responsibility, the evidence from the crime scene pointed directly at her. Her fingerprints and a matched blood-stained shoe print placed her at the scene of the crime, leaving little doubt about her involvement. The trial that followed was a highly publicized event, capturing the attention of the nation. Rosie Alfaro was tried and convicted of first-degree murder with special circumstances. During the penalty phase of the trial, the jury deadlocked 10-2 on the sentence of death, resulting in a mistrial. However, a second jury later returned a verdict of death, sealing Rosie's fate. Her sentencing was unprecedented. At the young age of 20, Rosie became the first woman in Orange County, California to receive the death penalty. The gravity of her crime and the brutality of her actions left the court with no choice but to impose the harshest punishment available. Cynthia Kaufman. Cynthia Lynn Kaufman was born on January 19, 1962, in the city of St. Louis, Missouri. From an early age, she faced the harsh realities of life as her father abandoned the family, leaving her mother to raise Cynthia and her brothers alone. Raised by a single mother, Cynthia's childhood was marked by instability and turmoil. In a desperate act, her mother even attempted to give Cynthia and her brothers away at one point. At the age of 18, she made a fateful decision and entered into marriage, hoping to create a new life for herself. However, this union was short-lived, and Cynthia found herself once again adrift in a world filled with uncertainty. Seeking a fresh start, Cynthia decided to leave her troubled past behind and move to Arizona with a close friend. Little did she know that this decision would lead her down a path she could never have imagined. It was in Arizona that Cynthia's path crossed with that of James Marlowe, a man recently released from jail. Their meeting would prove to be a turning point in both of their lives, as they quickly formed a bond fueled by their shared love for methamphetamine. As their addiction deepened, Cynthia and James began to engage in a series of violent crimes. Their partnership became a catalyst for a reign of terror that would grip the nation. The crimes committed by Cynthia and James sent shockwaves through the communities they targeted. The depths of their depravity seemed to know no bounds. When Cynthia was eventually apprehended, her defense attorneys argued that she suffered from battered woman syndrome, claiming that she was a victim of James Marlowe's manipulation and abuse. They painted a picture of a woman trapped in a cycle of violence, unable to escape. The stage was set for a trial that would captivate the nation and forever cement Cynthia Kaufman's name in the annals of criminal history. As the trial unfolded, the evidence against Cynthia and James was overwhelming. The jury had the daunting task of deciding their fate, weighing the horrifying acts they committed against the claims of abuse and manipulation. The verdict was delivered, and Cynthia Kaufman became the first woman in California to receive the death penalty since its reinstatement in 1977. Handcuffed and led away from the courtroom, Cynthia Kaufman's fate was sealed. She would spend the rest of her days on death row, awaiting her ultimate punishment. Today, Cynthia Kaufman resides in the Central California Women's Facility, a place where the most dangerous criminals are held. Her name is etched in history as one of the most notorious and feared women to have ever walked the corridors of the criminal justice system. This is the end of what we have for you today. We hope you enjoyed it. To watch more videos like this, click on the cards on your screen.